The city was loud that morning, with buses rolling down the busy street, cars honking, and people walking quickly with their heads down. London always seemed to be in a rush, as if no one had time to stop, not even for a second. On a corner near a coffee shop, a woman sat on the cold ground. She was wrapped in an old coat that had lost its color after too many rainy days. Her hair was messy, and her eyes carried a tiredness that could not be hidden. She had a small cardboard sign resting on her knees. The words on it were written in shaky letters, "Please help. Hungry. Just need a little to eat." The woman's name was Sarah. Not long ago, she had lived in a small apartment. She had friends, a routine, and even dreams. But life has a way of turning quickly. A lost job, a health problem, and broken family ties had all come together like a storm, leaving her without a roof over her head. Now, Sarah sat there, day after day, watching people pass by. She hoped for a small smile, a kind word, or maybe a coin that would let her buy bread. Most people, however, acted as if she was invisible. Their eyes would meet her for half a second, and then they would quickly look away. To them, she was just part of the street, like a lamp post or a trash bin. That morning was no different. A businessman walked by, speaking loudly on his phone, his shiny shoes clicking against the pavement. He did not even notice Sarah. A woman holding a coffee cup rushed past, almost spilling it on her coat, but she didn't stop to apologize. A group of young friends laughed as they passed, their voices cheerful, but none of them looked her way. Sarah sighed, her hands shaking slightly from the cold. She thought to herself, maybe today will be another day without food. Maybe another day where I just disappear in the crowd. Her stomach growled. She had not eaten properly in 2 days. The small coins she had managed to collect yesterday were only enough for a cup of tea, and nothing else. She tried to keep her dignity, not wanting to shout or beg loudly. Instead, she waited, hoping someone would notice her cardboard sign. Hours passed, and her hope grew weaker. Then, something unusual happened. Out of the crowd, a tall man came walking toward her. He was wearing casual clothes, a hoodie pulled over his head, and sneakers that looked well worn. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. Just another person about to walk past. But as he got closer, she felt a little courage rise inside her. She decided she could not let this chance slip away. Even if it was just for £1, that £1 could mean a sandwich, a small relief from hunger. With a soft and shaky voice, she called out to him. "Excuse me, sir, could you spare just $1, please? Just one." She lowered her eyes quickly, ashamed, as if asking for help was something wrong. She had learned that many people reacted with irritation when she spoke to them. Some waved their hands, some frowned, and others gave her sharp words that cut deeper than her hunger. The man stopped walking. Sarah noticed his shoes pause right in front of her. Slowly, she raised her eyes, expecting to see the usual look of annoyance or pity. But instead, the man was looking at her with a face full of surprise, as though he didn't expect to be asked. His hood shifted back slightly, and his face became clearer. He was not just any man, he was someone people recognized. It was Big Shaq, the comedian and rapper who had made people laugh all around the world with his funny style and catchy lines. But in that moment, there were no cameras, no crowd cheering, and no stage lights. Just a man standing in front of a woman who had almost nothing left. Sarah didn't realize who he was at first. To her, he was just a stranger she had dared to ask for help. But Big Shaq recognized the weight in her eyes. He saw that she wasn't asking for luxury or for too much. She wasn't pretending. She was asking for something so small, just $1, that it struck him deeply. He didn't move quickly. Instead, he stood there, quiet, his hands in his hoodie pocket, thinking. Sarah grew nervous. She thought maybe she had made him uncomfortable. She whispered again, "I'm sorry, just one. If you don't have it, it's okay. She tried to pull her cardboard sign closer, as if to hide her shame. She was used to rejection. She was ready to hear the same cold response she had heard so many times before. But then, Big Shaq knelt down slightly so that he was closer to her level. He didn't tower above her like most people did when they threw a coin and left. He looked into her face. His voice was calm and curious when he spoke. Why only $1? Why not ask for more? His question was not rude, it was genuine, as if he really wanted to know the answer. Sarah was caught off guard. She had not expected anyone to ask her that. Her lips trembled as she explained. I don't want to bother people. I just need something small to eat. If I ask for too much, people get angry. $1 is enough. Her eyes welled with tears, not because of sadness alone, but because someone had finally stopped to listen, even for a moment. The people passing by began to notice. Some slowed down, whispering to each other, surprised that Big Shaq was talking to a homeless woman on the street. A few even pulled out their phones, though he didn't care. His focus was not on the crowd, it was on Sarah. He nodded slowly, taking in her words, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. The moment was unusual on that busy London street. A man known for making millions laugh, Big Shaq, was standing still in front of a homeless woman who had asked him for just $1. People around began to notice, but Sarah, sitting on the cold pavement, only cared about his next words. Her heart raced, wondering if he would give her the small coin or simply walk away like everyone else. Big Shaq didn't move immediately. He looked at her cardboard sign, then back at her face. His expression wasn't one of annoyance or pity. It was thoughtful. Sarah grew nervous with each passing second. She wondered if she had made a mistake by asking. She whispered again, almost apologizing, I'm sorry for stopping you. It's just. I didn't know who else to ask. But instead of brushing her off, he asked a question that surprised her. His voice was calm but curious. Do you sit here every day? Sarah nodded slowly. Most days, yes. Some people give a coin, some don't. I just try to get through the day. She lowered her eyes again, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She hated explaining her situation, but something about his voice made her feel less ashamed. Big Shaq didn't rush. He crouched down a little, resting his arms on his knees, so that he wasn't towering over her. This simple act shocked Sarah. It had been so long since anyone had chosen to look at her eye to eye, as though she was worth the respect. What's your name? He asked gently. Sarah, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled faintly. Sarah, that's a strong name. My mum used to say names carry power. Yours sounds like it has a story. She blinked in surprise. Nobody had asked her name in months. People usually just dropped a coin, muttered something like here you go, or ignored her completely. For a brief moment, Sarah felt like a real person again, not just another invisible figure on the street corner. She nodded. Yes, it does have a story. But I don't think anyone wants to hear it. Big Shaq leaned closer, his voice softer now. I want to hear it. Tell me. Her hands trembled. She didn't know why she felt like opening up, but something in his eyes told her it was safe. She took a deep breath and began to explain. I used to have a job. I worked at a small shop, nothing big, but it paid enough for rent. Then the shop closed, and I couldn't find another job quick enough. My landlord gave me warnings, but I couldn't keep up with the payments. I thought my family might help, but things were complicated. We had fights, and soon, I had no one left to ask. I lost my place, and I ended up here. That was almost a year ago. She paused, her voice cracking. People think I'm lazy, or that I don't want to work. But I tried. I just I just got unlucky. And once you're out here, it's harder to come back. Every day feels heavier than the last. Her words fell into the air, carried by the noise of the city, yet they felt powerful. Big Shaq didn't interrupt. He listened quietly, nodding, showing her that her story mattered. The people walking by slowed down, many of them curious now. They whispered to one another, "Is that Big Shaq? What's he doing?" Some even pulled out their phones to film, but he ignored them completely. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She quickly wiped them with the back of her hand, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to bother you with my story. I just thought, maybe you could spare $1. That's all." But Big Shaq shook his head softly, not in refusal, but in amazement. "You asked me for $1, Sarah, but you've given me something worth more than money. You reminded me how tough life can be, and how strong people have to be just to survive." Sarah looked at him in confusion. Nobody had ever said such words to her. She wasn't used to being seen as strong. Most people only saw her as weak, broken, or lazy. Big Shaq stood up straight for a moment, glancing at the cafe across the street. Then he looked back at her. "I'm not going to give you just $1, Sarah. I want to do something better." Her eyes widened. She wasn't sure what he meant. Part of her heart jumped with hope, but another part held back. She had learned the hard way that promises often broke before they were kept. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. "Let's get you something to eat." Sarah froze. She wasn't used to kindness in this form. People had bought her food before, but never sat with her or invited her as if she was equal. She hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want to trouble you." Big Shaq's voice was firm but gentle. "You're not trouble. You're a person who deserves to eat, just like everyone else." Slowly, Sarah placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and steady, and for the first time in months, she felt safe being led by someone. Together, they crossed the street, heading toward the cafe. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread drifted through the air. It had been so long since Sarah had smelled food this close, and her stomach growled loudly in response. She quickly covered her mouth, embarrassed, but Big Shaq only smiled. When they entered the cafe, people inside turned to look. Some recognized him instantly, while others simply noticed the unusual sight of a famous man walking in with a homeless woman by his side. But Big Shaq didn't care about the looks or whispers. He guided Sarah to a seat by the window. "Sit down," he said kindly. "This morning, you're not sitting on the cold pavement. You're sitting here like everyone else." Sarah's hands trembled as she touched the chair. It felt strange to sit at a proper table again, surrounded by warmth and the sound of cups clinking. A memory flashed through her mind years ago. She used to meet her friends at a cafe like this, laughing over coffee. She had forgotten what that felt like until now. Big Shaq walked to the counter and ordered food. Not just a sandwich, not just a drink, but a full breakfast meal, warm and filling. When he brought the tray to the table, Sarah's eyes widened. Eggs, toast, beans, sausages, tea. It looked like a feast to someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were not from sadness. They were from relief. She whispered, "This is too much. I can't accept all of this." Big Shaq shook his head with a smile. "Yes, you can. You deserve it. Eat, Sarah." Her hands shook as she picked up the fork. The first bite of food filled her mouth with warmth, and suddenly she couldn't stop. Bite after bite, she ate as though she was afraid the food would disappear if she didn't finish quickly. But Big Shaq didn't rush her. He simply sat across the table, sipping his tea, and watching with a gentle smile. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was not invisible. Someone saw her. Someone cared. And that small moment, the pause of one man who listened, was about to change everything. The cafe felt like another world compared to the cold pavement outside. The air inside was warm, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread. Sarah sat quietly by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. She hadn't felt this kind of comfort in what seemed like forever. Every sip warmed her throat, every bite of food reminded her of what it meant to feel human again. Big Shaq sat across from her, relaxed but observant. He wasn't on stage, he wasn't joking, he wasn't performing. He was simply present, giving his full attention to someone the world had ignored. Sarah tried to eat slowly, but her hunger was too strong. She finished almost everything on the plate quickly, then lowered her fork, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, glancing at him nervously. "I didn't mean to eat like that. I was so hungry." Big Shaq smiled kindly. "Don't apologize. Food is made to be eaten. I'm glad you enjoyed it." Those words, so simple, made Sarah's throat tighten. She had gotten used to apologizing for everything taking up space, asking for help, even existing. But here, she was being treated like any other person in the cafe. For a while, silence filled the table. Sarah kept her eyes on the teacup, afraid to meet his gaze for too long. But then Big Shaq leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Tell me something, Sarah," he said gently. "When was the last time you sat in a place like this?" Her mind traveled back, and she gave a small, sad smile. "Years ago. I used to come to cafes with my friends after work. We'd laugh, talk about silly things, complain about bosses, just normal stuff. I didn't realize then how special those simple moments were. I thought they would last forever. But life has a way of surprising you." She sighed, her voice trembling. "Now, when I see people laughing in cafes, I feel like I'm looking through a glass window into another world, one I don't belong to anymore." Big Shaq nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "But you do belong, Sarah. Just because life knocked you down doesn't mean you lost your place in this world." Her eyes glistened with tears. She quickly looked down again, trying to hide them. She didn't want to cry in front of strangers. But Big Shaq noticed, and instead of ignoring it, he spoke softly. "You don't have to hide your tears. Sometimes, crying means you're still fighting. It means you still care." Those words touched Sarah deeply. Nobody had spoken to her like that in so long. Most people gave her looks filled with pity or judgment. But his words made her feel stronger, even if just for a moment. As they sat there, Sarah began to open up more. The walls she had built around herself started to crack. She told him about her job at the small shop, about the landlord who forced her out when she couldn't pay rent, and about her family who had turned away when she needed them most. "I keep thinking I'll wake up from this," she confessed. "That I'll open my eyes and I'll be back in my old bed, back in my old life. But every morning, it's the same pavement, the same cold, the same looks from strangers. And it breaks me a little more each day." Big Shaq listened without interrupting. He didn't try to fix everything with quick words or empty promises. He just let her speak. And for Sarah, being heard was already a gift she hadn't felt in a long time. At one point, she looked at him and asked shyly, "Why did you stop for me? You could have just walked past, like everyone else. You didn't even know me." He paused, then gave her a simple answer. "Because I saw you." The words hit her harder than she expected. She pressed her lips together, trying not to cry again. All her life recently, she had been invisible. People turned their eyes away the moment they saw her on the street. To be told, "I saw you," meant more than food, more than money. It meant her existence mattered. The conversation continued, and Sarah found herself laughing once or twice at his light comments. Her laughter surprised her. It felt rusty, like an old instrument being played again after years of silence. She covered her mouth, embarrassed, but Big Shaq only smiled wider. "You should laugh more," he said warmly. "It suits you." Sarah shook her head with a weak chuckle. "I forgot how." "You'll remember," he said firmly. Time passed quickly. The cafe grew busier, and people kept glancing at their table. Some whispered, some even tried to take pictures, but Big Shaq didn't mind. His attention remained on Sarah. To him, this moment wasn't about fame, cameras, or what people thought. It was about reminding one person of her worth. As they finished their tea, Sarah's face grew serious again. "When I go back out there," she said softly, "it'll be the same as before. Cold nights, empty days. This meal will be a memory, but it won't change my life." Her words carried a weight, a truth that was painful. Big Shaq leaned back, thinking deeply. He knew she was right. Giving her one meal wasn't enough to solve years of hardship. He tapped the table gently with his fingers, then looked into her eyes with determination. "Maybe it won't change everything," he admitted. "But maybe it can be the start of something. You've carried yourself this far, Sarah. You've survived nights most people can't even imagine. That means you're stronger than you think. What if today isn't just another day? What if it's the beginning of a new chapter?" Sarah blinked, unsure what he meant. "A new chapter?" "Yes," he said. "Sometimes, life needs a turning point. And maybe this is yours." Her heart beat faster. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. She had faced too many disappointments already. But his tone carried such certainty that a tiny flame of hope flickered inside her. For the first time in a long while, Sarah thought, what if he's right? What if things could change? Big Shaq stood up, stretching slightly. "Come on," he said with a smile. "Let's take a walk. There's more we can do than just sit here." Sarah hesitated, unsure of what awaited her outside that cafe window. But deep inside, she knew something had shifted. The way he listened, the way he spoke, it felt like a door had been opened. She slowly rose from her seat, her body still weak but her spirit a little lighter. And as she followed him out of the cafe, the busy world outside didn't feel as harsh as it did before. For the first time in a very long time, Sarah wasn't stepping back into the cold alone. The air outside felt different when Sarah stepped out of the cafe. She was still holding the warmth of the tea inside her, but more than that, she was holding a strange feeling of hope that she hadn't felt in years. Big Shaq walked beside her, steady and calm, his hands in his hoodie pockets. For Sarah, it was unbelievable. She had entered the cafe as a hungry stranger on the street, and she was leaving with someone who had treated her like family. They walked slowly along the busy pavement. People stared, some whispering, some recording with their phones, but Sarah barely noticed. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about who was watching. She was thinking about what was happening. Big Shaq glanced at her and said, "Sarah, you told me that when you leave this cafe, it will all go back to the same as before. But I don't agree. I think this is the start of something new for you." She looked down, unsure. "But what can really change? I still don't have a place to live. I don't have a job. I don't even have a clean set of clothes." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's true. But sometimes, the smallest step can lead to the biggest change. You asked me for $1. Instead, I want to give you something bigger, not just money, but a chance to start again." Sarah stopped walking. His words sounded too generous, too good to be true. "Why would you do that?" she asked softly. "I'm nobody. People walk past me every day and don't even look at me. Why are you different?" Big Shaq looked at her seriously. "Because everyone is somebody, Sarah. People forget that. They see the clothes, the situation, and they decide you don't matter. But you do. And maybe today, I was meant to be here for a reason." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again. She turned her face slightly, embarrassed. She didn't want to cry in front of so many strangers. But Big Shaq noticed and gently said, "Don't hide it. You've held too much inside already." As they continued walking, he led her toward a quieter street, away from the noise of the crowd. They stopped near a small clothing store. Sarah froze when she realized where they were. I can't go in there," she whispered. "Why not?" Big Shaq asked. She lowered her head. "Because I don't belong. Look at me. They'll think I'm stealing, or they'll throw me out." He shook his head firmly. "Not today. Today, you walk in with me." Before Sarah could protest, he opened the door and motioned for her to follow. Inside, the shop was bright and warm. The smell of new fabric filled the air. A few shoppers glanced at them curiously, but Big Shaq didn't care. He walked up to the racks and began looking at clothes. "Pick something," he said with a smile. Sarah's face turned red. I can't. I don't even remember the last time I wore something new." He handed her a simple sweater and a pair of jeans. "Start with this. Everyone deserves to feel fresh and clean. Clothes don't just cover you, they give you confidence." Her hands shook as she held the clothes. She whispered, "This feels like a dream." Big Shaq chuckled. "Then let's make it a real one." When she came out of the fitting room wearing the new outfit, she almost didn't recognize herself. The mirror showed someone who looked younger, stronger, someone who looked like she belonged. Sarah touched the fabric as though it might vanish. "I don't deserve this," she murmured. But Big Shaq shook his head. "You deserve more than this. This is just the beginning." From the clothing shop, he took her next to a small community center nearby. Inside, posters on the walls showed programs for housing support, job applications, and counseling. Sarah's heart beat faster. She had walked past places like this before but never dared to go in. Big Shaq spoke to one of the workers at the desk. "This is Sarah. She's been through a lot, but she's ready for a fresh start. Can you help her get connected with housing and support?" The worker nodded warmly and handed Sarah some forms. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. She whispered to Big Shaq, "You didn't have to do all this. You could have just given me $1 and walked away." He looked at her gently. "But if I walked away, you'd still be sitting on that corner tomorrow. You asked for $1, but what you really needed was someone to see you, someone to believe in you. I want you to believe in yourself again." Sarah sat down with the worker, who patiently explained the steps. Temporary housing, food support, and even training opportunities. It was overwhelming. For so long, she had survived one day at a time, never thinking about the future. Now, suddenly, the future looked possible. After finishing the forms, she turned to Big Shaq and said quietly, "You don't know what you've done for me. People will think it's about the money or the clothes. But it's not. It's about how you treated me. You made me feel human again." Big Shaq smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's all I wanted. Sometimes people don't need grand speeches, they just need someone to stop, listen, and care." Word of the encounter began spreading quickly. A few of the bystanders who had recorded outside the cafe had already uploaded videos online. Within hours, social media was buzzing. People were sharing clips of Big Shaq sitting with a homeless woman, walking with her, buying her clothes. Comments flooded in, "This is what humanity looks like. Respect to Big Shaq. The world needs more kindness like this." But for Sarah, the attention didn't matter. What mattered was that her life had shifted. One morning, she had been invisible, asking strangers for a single coin. By the evening, she had hope, new clothes, and a path toward a better tomorrow. That night, as she lay in a clean bed at the temporary shelter, Sarah closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I'm still here. I'm not invisible anymore." She thought about Big Shaq's words, "Maybe today is the beginning of your new chapter." And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. The night passed quietly in the shelter, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah slept on a real bed. It wasn't fancy, it was small, with plain sheets and a pillow that smelled faintly of laundry soap, but to her, it felt like luxury. She curled beneath the blanket, warm and safe, her stomach full for the first time in days. As she drifted into sleep, she whispered, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Big Shaq, to God, or simply to life itself. When morning came, sunlight streamed through the small window of the shelter room. Sarah sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. She touched the fresh sweater she had received yesterday, still folded neatly at her bedside. It was proof that yesterday wasn't a dream. She smiled softly and thought, maybe today will be different. Maybe today I'll walk forward instead of standing still. Meanwhile, the world outside her little room was already buzzing. Videos of Big Shaq's encounter with Sarah had spread everywhere overnight. Social media was filled with posts about it. The clips showed him kneeling to talk to her on the street, walking her into the cafe, buying her clothes, and helping her find shelter. Millions of people had watched. Some left comments saying they cried, others said they were inspired to help someone in their own neighborhood. Headlines began appearing online, Big Shaq's act of kindness moves thousands and homeless woman's life turns around after asking for just $1. But Sarah didn't know about any of this yet. She was focused on the small steps in front of her. Later that day, she returned to the community center to finish her paperwork. The staff there were kind and welcoming. They helped her schedule an appointment with a counselor, and they connected her with a local program that offered skills training. For the first time in months, Sarah wasn't thinking about just surviving another day. She was thinking about building something new. Later that week, she met Big Shaq again. He had promised to check on her, and he kept his word. When he arrived at the shelter, Sarah's face lit up with a smile she didn't even know she still had. "You came back," she said, almost in disbelief. "Of course I did," he replied. "I told you this is a new chapter, and I want to see you turn the page." They walked together in the small garden behind the shelter. Sarah told him about the forms she had completed, about the counselor she was scheduled to see, and about the training program she hoped to join. Big Shaq listened with the same patience as before, nodding, encouraging her with every word. "You're doing it, Sarah," he said proudly. "Step by step. That's how all journeys begin." Tears gathered in her eyes again, but this time they weren't from sadness, they were from gratitude. "You don't know what this means to me. People think you changed my life because you gave me food and clothes. But the truth is, you changed my life because you reminded me that I still matter. You looked at me like I was human when everyone else looked away." Big Shaq placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Never forget that, Sarah. You are human. You are valuable. And you always mattered, you just needed someone to remind you." Word of Sarah's story didn't just stay online. Soon, local organizations reached out to her. Some offered extra support, some offered job opportunities, and others donated supplies to the shelter where she stayed. People who had watched the video began visiting shelters in their own cities, bringing food, clothes, and warm words to those in need. One evening, Sarah sat in the community center with other women who were also rebuilding their lives. For the first time, she wasn't the quiet one sitting alone in the corner. She was talking, laughing, and sharing her story. She told them, "I thought I was invisible. I thought nobody would ever see me again. But one person stopped, listened, and reminded me of my worth. If it happened to me, it can happen to you, too. Don't give up." The women listened, inspired. Sarah had gone from someone who felt broken to someone who was helping others feel hope. The transformation wasn't complete, she still had a long road ahead. But something inside her had shifted forever. A few weeks later, Sarah attended her first training session at the center. It was a simple program, teaching basic office skills. She walked into the classroom nervously, clutching a pen and notebook. But as she sat down, she remembered Big Shaq's words, "This is your new chapter." She straightened her back, took a deep breath, and began writing notes, determined to move forward. Outside, people continued to talk about the story. It was no longer just Big Shaq helps homeless woman. It had become a lesson about kindness. Newspapers and talk shows discussed it, asking, what if we all acted this way? What if each of us stopped for just one person in need? Big Shaq, when asked about it in an interview, kept his answer simple. Look, I didn't do anything special. I just treated her the way every human deserves to be treated. That's it. We all have the power to do the same. Those words spread even further. Communities started small projects to help the homeless. Strangers shared their own stories of kindness. All because one man chose to stop when a woman asked for a single dollar. Months later, Sarah looked back on that day with disbelief. She remembered sitting on the cold pavement, clutching her cardboard sign, afraid to even speak. And she remembered how Big Shaq's response had changed everything. She thought to herself, I asked for $1, but I received my life back instead. She wasn't rich now, she wasn't famous, but she was no longer invisible. She had friends at the shelter, a place to sleep, food to eat, and the chance to rebuild her life one step at a time. Most importantly, she had her dignity again. And whenever she felt doubt creeping in, she repeated Big Shaq's words to herself, everyone is somebody. That phrase became her anchor, reminding her that she was not defined by the street, not defined by her past, but by her strength and her humanity. In the end, Sarah's story wasn't just about a homeless woman and a celebrity. It was about the truth that kindness, even from one person, can change the course of another's life. One small act can ripple outward, touching hearts across the world. Sarah had asked for $1. What she received was priceless respect, hope, and the courage to begin again. And for those who heard her story, the lesson was clear: sometimes the smallest act of kindness can become the biggest turning point in someone's life.